All right, today I Trace Bell. I'm really excited and really grateful. So thanks for being here, Trace.
Thanks so much for having me on, Kendall. It's a joy to be able to do this with you.
Yeah. So you're the son of Rob Bell. Now, not everybody, surprisingly, that hears this might know about him. So I wanted to give a little background about him. I mean, no, this is about you, but obviously that all is intertwined. So you just tell me if I have this right. So Rob Bell was a pastor of Mars Hill mega church. He wrote a book called Love Wins, which posits that universalism might be true, and then he received a lot of criticism, and then he resigned as a pastor. Is that pretty much correct?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of what happened. Yeah,
Okay, awesome. So, how old are you, by the way?
24.
24. Okay. So I guess you were born when Rob was a pastor at Mars Hill.
Uh, y- I think he started maybe when I was like 2 years old.
Okay.
Or I was only a couple years old. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, what was your upbringing like?
Yeah. So my parents started Mars Hill Mega Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I was born in Grand Rapids, and I grew up, interestingly enough, not really having a relationship to church. My parents actually didn't make my brother and I go to church very often. Um, it felt like they were so tired and exhausted of the politics of running a church, and there were so many elements of running a mega church that were so soul crushing and exhausting that they actually kept my brother and I just separate from the whole thing. So I only have a few memories of actually going to church and going to church service, and it was always weird energetically because I could feel that my parents were trying to do the right thing and trying to give people a gift by giving them this kind of progressive new look at church, but they were also so tired and worn out by it that energetically as a kid I could feel that dissonance.
Mm,
So I, as a kid, had no like inclination to really engage with church or really engage with organized religion because I could just, ever since I was a little kid, I could feel that it wasn't really giving my parents a ton of life. So it was definitely a paradox of having my family be running the fastest growing mega church in the Midwest at the time, but not really going to church, not really having a relationship with church, not really having any sort of interest or relationship with organized religion. My parents purposely moved my brother and I to one of the least religious areas in Grand Rapids. They wanted us to go to a school that was the least religious and it would matter the least that my dad was Rob Bell and pastor at Mars Hill
mm.
mega church. So it just wasn't a big. It always kind of felt like something my parents were kind of doing off to the side, and it just didn't really feel like a big part of my life. So, which I'm very grateful for. I'm really grateful that I wasn't immersed in a lot of that because there was a lot of unhealth. There was a lot of
Hmm.
stuff that I would have to deconstruct from later. And I watched a lot of people have to go through kind of painful deconstruction processes surrounding religion. And I didn't have to experience that. So I'm grateful for that aspect of it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very unique experience. At the same time, it's not unique because hey, you're a PK's kid, and obviously, a lot of them have it's a hard upbringing for them, but you're unique in the way that your parents actually tried to um, give you some separation from that, and also obviously being a mega pastor from the spotlight of popularity and all the pros and cons that come from that. So it's very unique and very interesting. Um, yeah. So did you consider yourself a Christian or not? And did did your parents did they have time to like read the Bible to y'all, or did they not want to do that?
Yeah, I don't really remember. I don't have any memories of my parents reading me the Bible growing up. I remember my dad would tell Jesus stories sometimes, like to really try to capture the essence of who Jesus was. And I found a lot of the Jesus stories really inspiring. I never considered myself a Christian at any point in my
Hmm.
life. I didn't really even know, like, I just didn't even really know what that meant. I didn't really feel anything. I mean, the few times that I like went to church and sat in service, um, I remember thinking like, am I supposed to be feeling something? I see
Mm,
a lot of people around me having an experience.
mhm,
They're really like involved in this experience and getting something from it, but it just didn't really do anything for me. So I never considered myself a Christian. The few ideas that I would hear around religion growing up, like the idea that there's a hell, that people are going to burn in forever if they don't believe in God, just sounded so ridiculous and asinine to me that I was like, why would I want to be a part of something that has the idea that there's going to be like tons of people that go burn in hell forever? Ideas about a lot of the Christian ideas just didn't sit right with me and didn't interest me.
mhm,
So it just never really grabbed or interested me. So yeah, I didn't get my um, I had a different kind of like almost spiritual connection. I had this like spiritual curiosity,
mm,
and I always thought of myself as agnostic. I never
mm,
considered myself atheist. The idea that there's no sort of higher power, the idea that it's just this material, physical universe, felt equally ridiculous to me as some of the kind of Christian ideas about a heaven and hell. So I always considered myself agnostic, of like I don't know, but
mhm.
I always felt this like intuition and this hunch that there was something greater out there. There
Right.
was some sort of greater, higher intelligence that this whole thing is operating within. But it didn't, that intuition didn't feel like it lined up with the idea of a Christian God that I'd heard.
Mm. So did you, have any, like, conversations with your dad or your parents, and did they how did they, like did they encourage y'all to, explore spirituality or
Yeah, I only ever felt encouragement from my parents. Like I would ask them kind of I had these like deep kind of metaphysical curiosities. Like I would
Mhm.
ask my dad like why is there what's the nature of infinity? I was
Mm.
always really fascinated by the nature of infinity. I was always fascinated by consciousness, what
Mhm.
consciousness is. I was like, okay, this the fact that consciousness is here, like there's something we can point to and be like this consciousness is here. That's the reason we're aware of this experience. That was fundamentally mystifying to me. The fact that that was
Mhm.
like a thing that I couldn't exactly put my finger on. Like there's some awareness that's aware of traces of experience. And I would read. I remember as a kid, I would read like kind of scientific explanations for consciousness, like it's only produced by the brain, and that felt very limiting to me. And I was like, that's just that there's no way consciousness is just limited to the brain. It has to be deeper than that. So I was very fascinated by consciousness and these other kind of deep metaphysical questions. I remember asking, why is there something rather than nothing? It makes more sense
Mm.
for the universe just to be nothingness.
Mhm.
Why is there creation? Why is there somethingness? And I only ever felt encouragement from my parents. They would engage in those discussions with me. They never gave me like concrete answers like
Mm.
this is why this is. They only
Mhm.
ever met my questions, with more curiosity, encouraging me to read more and discover more and learn more. So I really felt like I grew up in an environment that really fostered curiosity, fostered that following of your intuitions, which I'm really grateful for. My parents never came down with any absolute truths or shut down any of my questions. They only encouraged that childlike curiosity within
Mm.
me.
Wow. Yeah, that's really special and very unique. Um, so man, those are all great questions you had growing up. Can you pinpoint something that kind of sparked your interest in that? Like, where did those ideas and questions originally come from?
It felt like it came from my direct experience. I mean, I remember as a really little kid having the feeling like I've been here before. Like this
Mm,
wasn't my first life. Like there was just this feeling within me, like deep within my body of like the idea that I was just born as this just like material physical being of trace and this is my first life. Um just didn't sit right. Like it was like, okay, there's some deeper aspect of me, and I didn't have the words. I didn't know if it was soul or
mm,
spirit or consciousness, but there was just this feeling like, okay, this isn't my first experience of life. And then as a kid, I just remember being really fascinated by consciousness. I mean, I remember just listening to music in my room, like the idea, the fact that like experience was here and I was experiencing experience, like the simplicity of just that there's anything here at all and I'm able to experience it, was really fascinating and intriguing to me. So I felt like all of my questions feel like they were just coming from this kind of deep curiosity that was almost innate in me. Um, and yeah, it just came from just like observing the miraculousness of
Hmm.
experience and how like crazy it is that there's anything at all, like the fact that experience is here. So yeah, that's really what drove most of my questions.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. I don't know many kids that think about those things and have those questions. I think it's something we take for granted. Everything we experience is from our perception, from our consciousness, but we don't really think about where comes from, or we're, I guess, raised in religion, and have these answers that were given to us. And we don't think about it too deeply. Um, so where did you go from there?
Yeah, so I became, as a teenager, I became really interested in politics. I became really, my kind of social consciousness was really awakened during that time, and I became really horrified at wealth inequality and corruption and the American political system, the military industrial complex. I really started to awaken to a lot of the issues and see how much suffering was because of policy issues. So I became really fascinated with politics because I felt like politics was the arena where stuff can really be changed on a systemic level. So I graduated high school and went to UCLA to study political science. So I studied political science, and then when I was a senior, I had senior in college. I had a spiritual awakening, which completely changed my life. I had a non-dual awakening into the nature of consciousness. Recognized. That's when I recognized God. That's when I recognized spirit. I was agnostic up until that point of feeling like there was some sort of higher intelligence, feeling like um, God was actually pointing to a real reality. And I had my awakening into that. And that just completely transformed everything, transformed what I wanted to do with my life. And I decided that I wanted to help help evolve consciousness on the planet. I felt like that was what I was here to do, and um, you know, politics and changing things on a systemic level was going to be a part of that, but that wasn't going to be the only thing. That the changing things politically and changing things structurally, that was only warming me up to actually like help move consciousness forward on a mass way. So then I graduated college, and then I started teaching. I started teaching spiral dynamics. I started teaching meditation. I started running my own courses. I started working with organizations, bringing this work to organizations, so helping them become organizations that are full of whole people rather than fractured, fragmented people, and helping organizations become more human so that they can create better lives for the people within those organizations and be a force for good in the world. And so yeah, so that was my entrance into bringing this work to like really try to change systems and change structures. So that's what I'm currently working on right now. I'm putting most of my time right now into working with my partner Tina to teach spotlight dynamics to different organizations that are really being helped by this work.
Wow. There's a lot in there. That's great. In my own study, I've noticed there seems to be a pattern of a shadow awakening to systematic corruption and power, and then people will sometimes then have a more spiritual awakening of oneness. In grad school, I read 1984 by Orwell, and I applied it to a lot of my papers, and so I was kind of seeing that shadow awakening, I guess you could say, before I had my own awakening. Um, and I know you mentioned spell dynamics. I want to get more into that in another episode. Of course, I love that. Um, how would you describe your spiritual awakening? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so it was actually, it just kind of hit me out of nowhere. I remember it was summer of 2020. So pandemic had started a couple months earlier. So living in the house with my parents, definitely weird times. Definitely kind of a strange, surreal time. Also, especially during summer, of just like, wait, this is like summer and everyone's inside, and it's just like, what's going on with the world?
Mm.
And I remember it was so one late one night, I was just meditating, and like I mentioned, I've always been fascinated by consciousness, and I
Mhm.
always was
Mhm.
fascinated by like what consciousness is. I like it's here, it's present, and I can't really put my finger on it. I can't point to it. I can't describe it. I can't give it like a shape, a texture, a taste. It's aware of all that, but I can't define it with any sort of characteristic that I'm used to. And I was meditating, and all of a sudden it just clicked. It just it's the best way that I can describe it. Is it just everything just clicked into place, and I realized that consciousness is one with everything. Oneness means that oneness is realizing that the source of everything is consciousness, and consciousness is this invisible, indestructible substance that is always here. It is all the source of everything. And if you're hearing this and like it sounds like a bunch of cuckoo mumbo jumbo, it's hard to even describe and
Mhm.
explain. I mean, it's really something
Yeah.
that's experiential, and this is when people talk about a non-dual awakening, it's really realizing the non-dual nature of consciousness. And yeah, the best way I can describe it is it just something just clicked into place, and I just realized that this thing that I've always been fascinated by was truly one with everything. This whole scene, my whole life, everything that I've ever experienced was one with this very consciousness that I was fascinated by. And it was such a mind blowing, radical, paradigm shattering experience. And also, there was this simplicity in it too. And that was my favorite aspect of, or one of my favorite aspects of awakening and studying non duality was the how radical and mind blowing it is in its simplicity. Is it's just this consciousness, and it's just realizing that reality has always been this way and it's always been one, and it's what's always been here. So it's not some I had in the past I thought spiritual awakening involved like some sort of higher beings coming down and merging with someone, and angels coming down from the sky, and not to invalidate those experiences that can happen, but in my experience, it was something. It didn't involve any sort of form. It didn't involve any sort of things coming down from the sky. It didn't involve any sort of gates of heaven opening. It just was a simple realization of the very nature of that which is aware of this whole experience. And yeah, it just clicked, and that was my non-dual realization, and that
Hmm.
just completely changed my life from that point. It completely changed my meditation practice. It changed how I thought about myself, how I thought about others, how I made sense of the world. It changed the amount of love I had in my life and love I had in my heart, because that was another huge aspect of that awakening, was realizing that consciousness is synonymous with love,
Hmm.
because everything is one. Oneness is just another name for love. Love is the complete intimacy of experience. Love is when we realize that there's not two things. Love is when we realize
Mhm.
that there's just one. Because reality is one, reality can only love itself. There's
Mhm.
nothing outside of itself that could limit or be in opposition to itself. It's only love. So it was like this profound awakening into what this thing that I've always been fascinated by, consciousness, and this realization that what this is love.
Mm.
And just having that realization that all of this is love, all of it's always been love, I'm love, and the source of everything is love. I mean, that just completely changed my natural state and changed like how I understood myself and who I wanted to be in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really, really radical experience.
Yeah. Wow. Would you say like consciousness or love? Would you say that's synonymous with God, or would you say that God is the source of those things, or how do
Yeah,
you
I would.
understand that?
They're synonymous with God. I would.
Mhm.
God is just another word we give to describe
Mhm.
those things. That was another huge aspect of the awakening, was realizing that that which I was experiencing was God, and
Mm-hmm.
God isn't a being at a distance from myself. God actually is the reality of what I am.
Mm.
God is the reality of everything. Every single being's true reality is God. And God is a word that's pointing to something so much deeper than something external at a distance. Anything that's anything less than all encompassing love cannot be God, because God
Mm.
is love. And another thing that I connected at the time was like, oh my God, God literally is love. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not that God loves, it's that God
Right.
literally is love. And that was like so mind blowing. Because for me, who had always been agnostic to the belief in God, I was like, I believe there could be a higher power. I believe that there could be a higher intelligence. I don't know if there is for sure. And realizing that higher intelligence and that higher power that I had intuited was synonymous with love. And that actually was my own self. I mean, just incredible and just jaw-droppingly beautiful.
Mm. Wow. So after you had your awakening, did you, I guess, research into it? Be like, has other people had this happen to me or to them? Or did you be like, oh, I've already researched this and now I understand what it means?
Yeah, so I was reading some spiritual books before that. So I knew that I had heard people talk about awakening before, so I knew that awakening was a thing that people had
Mm-hmm.
experienced, and I knew that it was a thing that had been like well documented throughout history. And I was reading like Eckhart Tolle at the time,
Mm-hmm.
so when it happened, I knew what had happened. I knew that I had just had a non-dual awakening. I'd sort of understood it intellectually before then, but then like experientially, I really understood what a non-dual awakening was.
Mm.
And then after that, I like really started to read other people's accounts and read a lot of other stuff, and it just started to like make sense, not on a mind level, but on a heart level. And like I really started to be able to have my own experience that I could go back to understand really what so many spiritual teachers were talking about. So I had done a little reading before that, but then like after that, it completely changed my reading, and it helped me understand a lot more stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that some people, obviously some people just like, I don't understand this at all, which makes sense. And then some people I think are resistant to um, talk about non-duality because they're like, this world is broken and there's evil and stuff like that. And then also like, why does everyone not realize this? Oneness. What would you answer to that?
Man, that's a great question. Well, first off, I just want to validate any of those feelings. One of the hardest aspects of awakening into love is reconciling how much awful stuff there is that happens with that realization. Like, that's a very real predicament and real thing on the spiritual path, is that making sense of the suffering and the atrocities that occur during the human experience. So I don't know if there's like a great answer I can give to that will
Mhm.
satisfy that, because that's a real pain that we feel in our
Right.
hearts. And having a non-dual awakening does not take that pain away. In fact, it
Mhm.
it actually increases sensitivity, increases empathy, it increases your drive to want to help others alleviate their suffering and um, help others. So yeah, it's one of those things that's really hard to sort of articulate and give like a good explanation for it. I mean, I go back to, it's really experiential in um, having doing the practices like meditation, going
Mhm.
out in nature, yoga, psychedelics are another practice where people have non-dual awakenings on. It's one of those things that have your own experience with, and then have your own sense making process, rather than trying to intellectually understand it. Because that's one of the traps with non-duality, is
Mm.
that it can get turned into a philosophy or a theory or a like
Yeah, I was about
religion.
to get into that.
Yeah, and
I was gonna talk about the ego. Yeah.
yeah, totally. The ego can co-opt non-duality as a philosophy and a theory, which I'm guilty of. Um, it's very easy for it to happen. So for it to turn into some sort of like theory and philosophy that's talked about as like an absolute truth, That's not what non-duality is. It's something experiential, and it's the antithesis of any sort of like organized intellectual thought system,
Hmm.
because that's just more words for the mind, and that's more ideas. And then what was the other question you asked about? You asked a question about suffering in the world, and the ego. The ego. Why doesn't everyone experience this? That's another
Hmm.
fantastic question. I think there's a lot of different answers to that question. Um, I'm trying to think where to start with. I mean, I think part of this experience, we're not meant to be in oneness all the time. We're meant to experience individuality. We're meant to experience
Hmm.
the specialness and the uniqueness that is Kendall's life and what it's like to be Kendall, a unique, separate human from the rest of the world. We're meant to experience what it's like to be Trace, a unique, separate human from the rest of the world. So we're not meant to be in a non-dual state, a oneness state all the time.
Hmm.
Um, it's part of having human consciousness is meant to learn, explore, and learn what it's like to be a human. So I just think by the very design of reality, we're not meant to be in oneness all the time. Why certain humans don't wake up to oneness in their lives? It's not. I've thought about this a lot. I don't know. I think certain humans just aren't meant to, which doesn't mean they're any less. This is not sort of with non-duality. It's not any sort of idea of like some people are saved, some people are worthy of experiencing that. That's another thing that non-duality wants to avoid completely. Is the kind of there are certain people who deserve to get saved, and there are certain people that deserve to get saved. Whether or not you awaken to this doesn't make you any less of anything.
Hmm.
It's all part of the divine plan. Um, so yeah, I think certain people are just meant to experience life as just purely a human, and experiencing oneness wasn't part of their life plan. But again, like I know there's a part of us that keeps going on, an identity that keeps going on even after we die. So there's next lifetimes where they're able to experience oneness. And certain people, I mean, this is the love the love aspect of this whole equation means that oneness doesn't get forced onto us. Oneness is actually a choice. We
Hmm.
actually have the choice to let go of our ego, wake up to oneness. If oneness and love was forced onto us, it wouldn't be love. It would be
Hmm.
against our own free will. So part of the gift of creation, part of the gift of having this experience is that we have the choice to let go of our ego. We have the choice to choose to grow and heal and let go and realize oneness. And that's really the gift, is that we have the choice. If it was forced onto us, it wouldn't be very loving. So those
Hmm.
are my best answers to these questions. These are not
No,
necessarily
those are great.
these
I
are not
appreciate
easy
that.
questions, and they're definitely paradoxes and things that are deserve to be wrestled with and contemplated.
Right. Yeah. Even with the ego, I think there's when people define the ego, I think there's actually like two different parts to it. I think there's the ego. There's um, you know, trying to protect myself and think of myself, and being selfish, or thinking about the now. Um, what can satisfy me right now, my immediate grasping of something, rather than like long term, what is going to be best for me and for other people. Um, but there's also the ego, as in we are individuals, like you said, and that we need boundaries, like that can be healthy. Um, I think that there's some people say we need to kill the ego, and so I think that there's healthy aspects of the ego. So I think it's more about an awareness of it, and having a healthy ego. How would you speak about to that?
Yeah, I think that I kind of look at the ego as just the thing that it's like a survival mechanism. It
Right.
tries to help us. The ego's number one job is to make sure we survive as this human being. If we didn't have ego, then we wouldn't take the action to survive as a human being. So the ego is actually necessary for our survival as a human being. So realizing oneness and waking up to love is actually a death. It's actually a death of the ego. I mean, I think it's Richard Rohr that says fear of death is fear of God, because it's actually like the very fear you have to completely
Mm,
when your ego completely dissolves and you completely let go of your ego, then there's oneness. When you're in oneness, you're not worried about surviving. There's no survival as a human being in oneness. So the ego is like a necessary functioning of the human being, and it's not something to get rid of. It's not something to kill. It's just something to be aware of and understand that that's what it's trying to do. Because when you can build awareness of the way your ego functions, the second you have awareness of it, you're not prisoner to it. A lot of the reason that a lot of
mm,
people are, you know, so dysfunctional because of their egos is because their identity is completely wrapped up in their ego. Like they're not even aware of the way that their ego's operating. They're not even aware it's their ego.
mm,
The second you start to understand this ego within me is just trying to keep me alive, and these are the mechanisms and the strategies it does to keep me alive, then you're just witnessing it, then you're able to see it. And then you can have a deep sense of gratitude for your ego of like, wow, this thing is really important. Like,
mm,
I can talk about I can be in a state of oneness, and then if someone were to come like try to like attack me, I would like shift into like an ego kind of defensive mode of like, okay, my ego needs to now take over and do what's necessary for this human being to survive and protect itself. Like that's if I didn't have that, I wouldn't survive as a human being. So it kind of exploring the ways that the ego keeps us alive and keeps us um, kind of acts as a survival mechanism is really important. And that also allows us to let go of it when we need to let go of the times when the ego actually isn't helping us. Like, for example, like the inner critic is a great example. Like
mm,
we develop an inner critic because we learned from the environment around us. So there were certain things that weren't okay. And as children, the number one threat is being kicked out of the tribe. So if we develop a really strong inner critic, that's a way to keep our behavior in check so that we don't get kicked out of the tribe. Like that was actually an important job that the ego did, because if we get kicked out of the tribe, that's our threat to our survival. So as we get older and we still have this inner critic, and it's not helping us, it's really important to acknowledge that the ego is actually playing a necessary job in trying to keep us alive. But we can actually let go of it now because we're not at getting kicked out of the tribe is not a threat now because we're an adult, and it's not necessary to have that protective measure. So yeah, I really see the ego as something that's meant to acknowledge and honor and integrate rather than something to kill.
mm. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, well said. I think one other pitfall some people fall into after having an awakening is just saying the world is illusory, and they kind of retreat into themselves and just ignore any problems and just say, "Hey, you just need to realize that everything is one." And it's kind of the picture of the monk in a cave, ignoring the world and his problems. So I always think of you know just like Moses. He went up on the mountain. He talked to God, but then he came down. And just that, like you said, after the awakening, integrate that experience to then use it to help transform the world.
Absolutely, and I found in my experience the awakening into the love aspect that what I am actually is pure infinite love. What I am by its nature is pure peace and happiness. Filled me with this kind of energy that wanted to go share that with the world. So there was actually this like by going far enough internal to discover what's actually at the core of my being filled me with such a deep love that I felt like I couldn't help but want to go share it with the world. So to negate the world after awakening, to negate that anything matters, I always think that that's actually not going deep enough with
Mm,
awakening.
mm,
It's actually to kind of have any sort of kind of like nihilistic interpretation of awakening isn't touching deep enough into the love aspect of it. And that was in my experience was like rather than going out into the world and having trying to get the world to give me love, I was actually so filled with love myself and knowing that I am love that I can't help but share it with the world. So rather than trying
Mm,
to get something from the world, you're just trying to give something to the world.
right.
But I also want to acknowledge that, like, for certain people that have awakenings, it can be so paradigm shattering and like life changing that it is necessary to go kind of retreat for a year,
Mm,
couple years, however long it takes you just to kind of like recalibrate and go within. So there's no like one right path, but
mhm,
it definitely I didn't follow that path of like feeling like I wasn't interested in the world or that it just didn't matter. It was actually made it matter more and made me like want to go deeper into it.
mhm, right. Yeah. That's great. So kind of back to your story, to your process after your awakening. Um, you had that, I guess, episodes of podcasts with your dad about spiral dynamics, and so companies heard about that, and then they're like, "We want you to talk about this with us."
Yep, yep. So I got after that. So I did that series with my dad, and it blew up. Like it was amazing to see. I mean, I knew that a lot of people listened to his podcast, but I didn't know the extent to
Mm,
how popular that was going to get. So I started getting tons of emails, tons of people that wanted to talk about it, and people that worked at companies that wanted me to come in. So I started presenting it to organizations because people that worked at these companies were like, "Hey, my business really needs this."
mm,
And then I started teaching it to individuals. I started hosting my own class with my partner Tina. We started teaching the spiral. We called it "Living the Spiral" because I my take on spiral dynamics is um, these are all spiral dynamics. All the stages in the spiral are aspects of self that we need to embody and integrate.
mhm,
And each stage has really important perspectives and valid truths that we can't ignore. So the spiral was really like an embodied thing for me. So we created this class called Living the Spiral, which actually goes through each stage and focuses on how to integrate the wisdom and gifts of each stage, so that we're really living the wisdom of all of these so we can be like a fully integrated
mhm,
human. So that
mhm,
was really like the start of my work sort of was spiral dynamics, and it's still like the most popular thing that I do,
mhm,
which was really great for my work that I was able to have something that so many people resonated with, that so many people felt like they needed and wanted to learn more on. So I'm
mhm,
really grateful for that spiral series. I'm really grateful for all the opportunities that I got because of it, and I'm just really passionate about the material in spiral dynamics and how much we can learn and take from it. And it's kind of a core aspect of my work.
mhm. Oh, and right. Obviously, we know what spiral dynamics is, but for anybody listening, I would just say it's a psychological slash sociological kind of stages of development through, I guess you could say, what culture has gone through over time, but it's also kind of individual stages you can go through, and talking about the pros and cons of different stages. And just a way to really grow within yourself, but also see where other people at and kind of relate to them, and just understand the world. Is that how you kind of describe it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fantastic description. Yeah, I really see it as, I mean, it's a model that maps so many different things. It maps how humanity has evolved throughout time. It maps how individuals grow throughout time. It maps these different perspectives and how they all relate to one another. It maps these different aspects of self and these energies that we have within us. And it shows us where humans have been in history, and it also shows us where things are going. So I mean, I think there's so many uses and so many
Mm-hmm.
insights. I'm constantly learning more from it. We have a bunch of resources on my website at www.open-aware.com. We have a whole spiral dynamics section. You can also find our online course, Living the Spiral, on there as well. We have a self-paced online course for people. So we have a bunch of information on our website.
Right, and I'll link those in our podcast description. Um, so I'm just curious. Obviously, there's many ways you can apply this. How would you? how would you say that businesses get interested in the spiral? Like what aspect are they looking at it? They're like, I need this for my business.
That's a great question. So one of the things I've seen is that there's tension and conflict of perspectives within the organization. They can feel that not everyone is on the same page, and there's perspective differences that are really kind of keeping things from running as smoothly as possible, and are really starting to build certain tensions within the organization. So people that then hear about this model that has maps all these different kinds of perspectives, and actually, I mean, the beauty of the spiral is that it maps these different perspectives, but it actually finds the ways for all of them to work together, and it actually finds the commonality in the way that all of these can be integrated together to become more holistic and unified, rather than just mapping these like individual perspectives and just being like, okay, these are just mutually exclusive individual
Mm-hmm.
perspectives, like this is just how it is. It brings everything together. It brings a kind of oneness and a wholeness to
Hmm.
our different perspectives and the way that we sense make reality. So organizations realize that that's a problem, is that they're not having kind of synthesis and a wholeness within the organization, and they realize that the spiral could be a really helpful tool. The other thing that I think organizations see is that uh, the spiral really helps them understand their customer base and the people that they're serving better,
Hmm.
and it helps them understand their own strategies. So, like, what level of consciousness is marketing coming from? What level of consciousness are our own? Is the structure within the organization coming from? A lot of people within the organizations feel that certain things are super dated. Like it's just they feel like they're still running systems and structures within the organization that are from like a whole another time period, and they actually are. I mean, the people are right, and that's what the spiral maps is like. Yeah, actually, the thing you guys are running is like stage blue, which was like like a century or two ago, even further than that. So yeah, definitely a lot of organizations see that there's some sort of issue, and then some people within organizations see the later stages that spiral dynamics maps and see where the future is headed, and just recognize how important spiral dynamics is for understanding the future and understanding what kind of creating the organization that they really want to be. So like developing a vision of a futuristic kind of organization that's centered around wholeness and inclusivity, and actually becoming a powerful force for change in the world. So there's some people that we've worked with that are just kind of visionaries within their own organization and just see how important it is. And I mean, I genuinely believe that spiral dynamics will become something that's like taught in schools in at some point. I think it's going to be like common knowledge in the next, I don't know how many decades, but at a certain point, like the what it's mapping is so critical for understanding who we are and why we're here, that I think it's going to be something that's just taught everywhere. So there's people within organizations that recognize that and recognize like, oh, my organization just needs to know this, because it's like we're going to get left behind if we don't know this model.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. That's exciting. And that's great to see that businesses are picking that up. And I know I benefited so much personally through the spiral, and I also believe that it can be so impactful and helpful for the community and for the culture at large. One thing that I've noticed, I feel like, is that maybe in the past we had more shared myths and more areas we considered sacred, and that we kind of don't have um, as many modern myths or things that unite us together. And we also are kind of, like there's a Christian deconstruction, and we're kind of deconstructing these older models. And so obviously we've been talking about awakening, and like you said, there's meditation and psychedelics and all these different ways that are becoming more popular in the West. And so we're kind of trying to bring awakening and bring that sacredness back. And then I feel like spiral dynamics are a way that they're not exactly myths, but it's a model which helps us envision a way forward. So it's exciting to me to see these different things starting to be implemented more in our culture to help us get back these things and to help our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I really see spiral dynamics as exactly what you just said, is kind of giving humanity a like narrative that we can kind of make sense of and kind of unites us. Again, I the danger is something like spiral dynamics becoming like an absolute truth.
Right.
And it's not a perfect model by any means. Reality is a lot more nuanced and complex than any
Hmm.
model like spiral dynamics could accurately map. So I always add that caveat when I teach the spiral. I was like, it's a really helpful model for naming these certain generalized patterns that can help us make sense. But it's not something that fits perfectly in every situation. It's not something that completely describes humanity, completely describes all perspectives. Reality is a lot more complex and deep, but it does name these generalized patterns that can help us make sense and bring more unity and inclusivity and ultimately more love. I mean, I see the power of the spiral is increasing our ability for self love and loving others. And that's what made me gravitate towards the model in the beginning and find it so life changing and useful, is that it really is something that brings more love and more unity. And that's what I want our new stories and our new narratives that we collectively come around. Those should be the narratives and the stories that we're collectively coming around, because a lot of them have not been based in love. They've been based in separation and fear. So I'm really excited for the future and potential of people learning this, and yeah, it's super exciting.
Yeah, that's great. I totally agree. I'm right there with you. Um, is there anything? Do you have plans for the future, or are you just gonna continue doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, so yeah, we have some good plans for the future. So continue to work. We're excited about continuing to work with organizations. We want to continue bringing this to bigger and bigger organizations. We're working with some healthcare companies right now, which is super exciting. I've always been passionate about helping and fixing healthcare in this country. I've always been appalled by the state of healthcare in this country and the fact that we don't have a single payer system and that we let people go bankrupt and don't take care of people. And it's just absolutely sickening to me that our healthcare system is so for profit driven and kind of exploitative. And so we're working with healthcare company, which is super exciting. So continue working with big companies. We want to start doing in-person retreats. I'm very passionate about doing giving people access to psychedelic experiences. I think psychedelic experiences are such an amazing tool for healing and creating experiences of interconnectedness and oneness, and triggering awakenings. So I'm very excited about psychedelics being a big part of my future, and I don't know exactly what form that's going to take, because obviously it's still a bit of a legal gray area. But I know that we're only headed towards more decriminalization and legalization. But I'm very excited for my work revolving around giving people access to these experiences and helping them understand them. So I'd love to have a retreat center at some point, some sort of actual physical location people could come to that could be like a healing center for mind, body, spirit. So super excited about that. So yeah, that's really, and then at some point I want to start writing and write books. I think my dad wrote his first book. Was he like 30 or early 30s maybe? So that's still almost a decade away for me. So no rush to get to, and not that I'm trying to match up all my all my goals to when my dad did stuff, but I'm in no rush to start writing. But yeah, I'm really excited about writing at some point in the future. Um, so yeah, I'm still going through a healing process. I mean, my awakening only happened 2 years ago, and when an awakening happens, it oftentimes triggers the dark night of the soul, where it brings a lot of stuff
Hmm.
that you gotta a lot of old patterns that you got to clear and that you got to see clearly and heal from. So I still feel like I'm going through that process. So I feel like currently going through the healing process.
Hmm.
I'm learning so much about it that I feel like that's actively shaping what I want my future to be and what I want my work to be. So I feel like I'm learning so much about healing that's giving me ideas for what I want to do for the future. But yeah, that's my partner Tina and I. That's our dream, is to have like a healing center, and work with individuals and people within organizations to help them heal and be kind of stewards of this better future where we take better care of the planet and better care of each other, and um, we build a world that's built around equality and inclusivity and wholeness and oneness.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's all great. I think it's really special that you're facilitating these things, and that you're you want to form in-person meetings. I think that the loss of communities is one of the things that's really hurt our
Yeah.
culture, and in any way we can try to increase community and build that up is really good, and I'm really interested in how we do that in the future. um, so yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add or talk about?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. I mean, I'd say for anyone that's any I think the last message I want to give is like all the stuff that I talked about. It's about and this is something I'm still learning. It's about really diving into the practices and getting like a real embodied experience of them. I think that one thing that can happen with spirituality is that it can become very conceptual and intellectual. And I'm someone that loves discussing and debating
Mhm.
philosophy and ideas. So I got to constantly watch myself that I'm not getting too in my head about stuff, and constantly bring myself back to the practices of just being in the moment, being still, all and also reminding myself that everyone's experience is completely different. We all have a unique way that spirit talks to us, and we all have a unique way that we understand and resonate with things. So it's really about finding what practices give you the most life, give you the most joy, and letting that be your spiritual connection. It's all about what matters and what means a lot to you. Um, so yeah, I want to end off on that note that it's really about going into your heart and finding what speaks to you most, and then just doing that practice, and really getting into your body and feeling it on a body level.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I could tend to intellectualize things and not actually just get into the practice and in the body, and actually doing those things has been so huge for me. So really appreciate that message. Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed it. A lot of great things. Really articulated it well. And just thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is a blast.